Theodore Robert Bundy presented a near-perfect facade of American promise. He was handsome, articulate, pursuing a law degree, and even volunteered his time at a suicide prevention hotline, actively engaging in work that demanded empathy and compassion. He cultivated a charming, clean-cut image, one that consistently drew people to him, making him, by all outward metrics, a safe and trustworthy individual. Yet, this meticulously crafted exterior concealed a pathology so profound that it shocked the world, creating a duality that remains the cornerstone of his chilling legend. How could a man who dedicated his spare time to saving lives be simultaneously orchestrating a calculated campaign to take them? The dissonance between the man and the monster is absolute. In his own words, uttered long after the mask had slipped, he maintained, "I'm not an animal and I'm not crazy. I'm just a normal individual." It is the terrifying truth of his perceived normalcy that forms the true foundation of fear. Bundy's prolific reign of terror was fully underway by 1974. His targets were almost exclusively young, attractive female college students, typically with long dark hair parted in the middle, a narrow specific victimology linked to his own psychological fixations. The systematic disappearance of women across Washington state began to stitch together a pattern that terrified local communities. But what allowed him to operate for so long without being apprehended was his distinctive and highly effective methodology. His strategy was pure social engineering, exploiting the charitable nature of his victims. Bundy would approach women on college campuses or in public spaces, often simulating an injury, an arm in a sling, a cast, or crutches, to appear helpless and non-threatening. He would then request assistance carrying books, ski boots, or other items to his car. This tactic was a weapon that exploited a fundamental social conditioning to assist someone in distress, effectively bypassing the victim's natural defensive caution. The superficial charm, a key psychopathic trait, and the display of weakness compelled young women to drop their guard, allowing him to maneuver them into a private location, his vehicle, where he could gain physical control. As witnesses started to surface, the only recurring tangible clue linking the disappearances was the description of a young man driving a tan 1968 Volkswagen Beetle. This seemingly innocuous vehicle was, in reality, a meticulously prepared instrument of death. Records later revealed that Bundy had deliberately removed the passenger seat. This modification turned the common sedan into a calculated concealment device, designed to hold victims prone and secured, demonstrating a high degree of organizational skill and diligence in his planning. Bundy's success was not rooted in superior intellect alone, but in his exceptional capacity for behavioral manipulation, turning a simple request for help into a prelude to abduction and murder. In 1974, Bundy moved to Salt Lake City to attend the University of Utah Law School, a change in geography that signaled an escalation rather than a pause in his criminal behavior. The murder spree continued unabated, spreading across state lines into Utah, Idaho, and Colorado. He claimed 2 victims in July 1974 and struck twice again in November of the same year. His presence in Colorado was confirmed when he abducted and murdered Karen Campbell from a hotel in Snowmass Village in January 1975. This expansion of violence was tragically facilitated by systemic failure within law enforcement. During the mid-1970s, police agencies operated largely in isolation, lacking effective mechanisms for sharing information across jurisdictions. Bundy thrived in this fragmentation. He could commit a crime in Washington, drive for a day, and commit another in Utah, safe in the knowledge that local investigators were operating in silos, unable to connect the seemingly unrelated strings of disappearances. His post-crime rituals further complicated investigations. Bundy was meticulous in removing evidence, often revisiting remote dumping sites and engaging in necrophilia, behavior consistent with severe sadism and paraphilia. These methodical steps indicated a need for absolute dominance and prolonged possession, aligning with his clinical profile of narcissistic personality disorder. The goal was not just to kill, but to control the victim's narrative and challenge the power of the police to capture him, sometimes modifying his methods based on media accounts of his crimes. The first definitive fissure in Bundy's seemingly impenetrable mask occurred on August 16, 1975, in Granger, Utah. A Utah Highway Patrol officer, observing suspicious driving, attempted to pull over the tan Volkswagen Beetle. Bundy fled, resulting in a chase and his subsequent apprehension. The search of his vehicle was illuminating, providing a terrifying inventory of his methodology. Inside the Beetle, investigators discovered the components of a pre-planned murder kit: a crowbar, a box of large green plastic garbage bags, an ice pick, a flashlight, gloves, torn strips of sheeting, a knit ski mask, and critically, a pair of handcuffs and rope. This discovery offered overwhelming circumstantial evidence of violent intent. Yet because police lacked centralized intelligence linking the car's contents to the existing multi-state missing persons cases, Bundy was initially arrested only for evading an officer. He was later briefly held for possession of burglary tools, but still managed to post bail and walk free. The failure of fragmented police intelligence to connect the dots in that critical moment was catastrophic. Bundy, demonstrating immediate and calculated damage control, wasted no time. He thoroughly cleaned the Volkswagen and sold it to a teenager the following month. It was only in October 1975, after 3 separate witnesses were able to pick him out of a police lineup, that he was formally charged with attempted murder and kidnapping. The irony is profound. The initial traffic stop provided all the physical proof needed, but without the context of consolidated intelligence, authorities had unwittingly released one of the most prolific serial killers in American history, allowing him to continue his activities. Bundy's subsequent legal maneuvers elevated the stakes, transforming his trial into a public spectacle, driven by his narcissistic confidence. He insisted on defending himself, a decision rooted in his grandiose sense of self-importance and belief in his own unique competency. While awaiting trial for the Utah kidnapping, he was charged in 1976 with the murder of Karen Campbell in Colorado and extradited to Aspen for a preliminary hearing in 1977. His self-representation, pro se, granted him certain privileges, including unsupervised access to the Pitkin County Courthouse Law Library to prepare his defense. On June 7, 1977, during a court recess, Bundy seized his first opportunity for escape. He jumped out of a second-story window, landing on the ground outside, and then brazenly jogged down Main Street before vanishing. The sheer audacity of the escape immediately triggered an FBI response. A federal arrest warrant for unlawful flight to avoid confinement was issued, and a $100,000 reward was offered for his capture. Bundy was located and apprehended a few days later, but the incident exposed severe deficiencies in courthouse security and prompted courts to reconsider the extent of privileges granted to defendants accused of violent crimes. Following his recapture, Bundy was moved to the Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, to await the Karen Campbell murder trial. Unbowed by his failure, he immediately began planning his next jailbreak, a move that cemented his status as a master manipulator. Over several weeks, he intentionally starved himself, losing approximately 30 pounds. The escape commenced on New Year's Eve, December 30, 1977, under the cover of a predicted heavy snowstorm. Bundy executed his plan with meticulous detail. He used tools to remove a light fixture from the ceiling of his cell and widened the small hole. He then arranged books and blankets under his sheets to create a decoy, making it appear as though he was asleep. Bundy squeezed his emaciated body through the narrow opening and crawled through the ceiling ducting. He dropped into an absent jailer's apartment below, changed into civilian clothes, and stepped out into the blizzard-swept night. His ability to blend into the social fabric even while fleeing was demonstrated by a chilling local anecdote. A resident of Rifle, driving through the snowstorm, unknowingly picked up a shivering man matching Bundy's description and gave him a ride out of Glenwood Springs, illustrating how Bundy leveraged human kindness and his charming demeanor one last time to secure his freedom. The desperation and psychological high of successfully evading authorities fueled the extreme violence that characterized his subsequent final crime spree. His narcissistic need to perform and control, which had enabled his first escape, now directly set the stage for the systematic breakdown of his controlled MO. After successfully escaping Colorado for the second time, Bundy embarked on a cross-country journey, ultimately arriving in Tallahassee, Florida, where he would commit his final known crimes. For 6 weeks, he remained a fugitive, living under various aliases while blending into the university community surrounding Florida State University. In the early morning hours of Sunday, January 15, 1978, the pressure and desperation of being a hunted federal fugitive led Bundy to discard his usual careful methods, forcing him into a riskier, more impulsive, and brutally violent attack. An intruder entered the Chi Omega sorority house adjacent to the FSU campus and brutally attacked 4 sleeping women. Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy were bludgeoned to death. Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler suffered severe injuries but survived the attack. All 5 women were bludgeoned repeatedly with a blunt weapon, later identified as a piece of firewood. This attack marked a profound deviation from his established pattern of luring single victims to remote sites. The brazen decision to invade a crowded residence and target multiple victims reflects an erosion of his usual patience and control, characteristic of an offender under extreme duress. In the chaos and sadism of the Chi Omega assault, Bundy made the most consequential mistake of his criminal career. During the attack on Lisa Levy, Bundy bit her on the buttock, leaving behind a clear and irreversible physical signature. This act of rage and sexual dominance, driven by his paraphilia and need for control, was an impulsive biological flaw that betrayed his intellectual calculation. While Bundy was normally meticulous in removing every piece of evidence, he could not erase this forensic evidence. The carnage did not end there. Within the hour, an intruder matching the description of the man seen near the sorority house entered another nearby home and attacked Cheryl Thomas. 3 weeks later, Bundy claimed his final known victim, 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, who was kidnapped from her middle school in Lake City, Florida. Bundy's rampage in Florida underscored the deadly consequences of the systemic failure that had allowed him to escape Colorado. He was finally captured one last time on February 15, 1978, ending his campaign of terror. The systemic failures that allowed Bundy to escape had an unintended consequence. They drove him into a frenzy of violence that resulted in the forensic evidence necessary to end his spree. The desperation of being hunted had eroded his precision, forcing him into attacks that were riskier, yet ultimately exposed his biological identity. The trial for the Chi Omega murders in Miami, Florida, in 1979 became a media spectacle, largely fueled by Bundy's decision to act as his own attorney. This role allowed him to take center stage, leveraging his purported intelligence and charisma to cross-examine witnesses, including the Chi Omega survivors, transforming the courtroom into a personal stage for his narcissistic performance. His defense was a psychological extension of his control fantasy, attempting to dominate the legal process itself. However, even Bundy's charm and legal aptitude could not overcome the converging streams of direct and circumstantial evidence against him. The most damning evidence was the testimony surrounding the bite mark analysis. Dr. Richard Souveron, a forensic odontologist, presented photographic and physical evidence comparing molds taken from Bundy's dentition to the impression left on Lisa Levy's body. The distinct characteristics of Bundy's teeth, specifically his severely crooked lower teeth, provided a unique, individualized match. The presentation of this evidence was the moment the mask dissolved completely. Bundy, who had successfully cultivated an image of perfection and manipulated the justice system through intellectual vanity, was undone by a unique physical imperfection. This specific detail, the uniqueness of his dentition, meant that the bite mark acted as a biological fingerprint, providing the irrefutable link that secured the conviction. The bite mark, created in a moment of sadistic frenzy, became the ultimate signature of his guilt. The jury found Bundy guilty of the murders of Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman on July 24, 1979, resulting in the death sentence. Bundy spent the next decade on death row, exhausting appeals until his execution on January 24, 1989. In his final days, he granted interviews and made partial confessions, attempting to provide psychological context for his actions. He attributed his crimes to a fatal addiction to violent pornography, claiming it fueled his progression from fantasy to brutal reality. While this confession provided context, expert analysis of his psychological profile emphasizes that pornography was merely the vehicle for his fantasies. His true defining motivation remained absolute control, sadism, and possession. The final chapter of Ted Bundy's life closed on January 24, 1989, when he was executed by electrocution in Florida. The atmosphere outside Florida State Prison that morning was unparalleled in American criminal history. A massive crowd gathered, creating a carnival-like atmosphere. Revelers set up barbecue grills, held signs that demanded "Burn, Bundy, burn," and released fireworks. When the news of his death was confirmed, the crowd erupted in ecstatic cheers. This public celebration was more than simple relief. It was a profound societal catharsis, a collective release from the psychological burden imposed by a killer who had weaponized trust and hid successfully in plain sight. Ted Bundy's crimes left an indelible impact, forcing comprehensive structural reform within the U.S. justice system. His escapes, particularly the audacious flight across state lines, exposed critical deficiencies in inmate security protocols, and more significantly, the fundamental failure of law enforcement agencies to communicate across jurisdictional boundaries. Bundy, the narcissistic criminal seeking to prove his superiority over police agencies, inadvertently became one of the greatest catalysts for modern criminal justice evolution. His case underscored the urgent need for coordination, leading directly to the establishment of the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP, by the FBI in 1985. VICAP created a centralized system to track, analyze, and connect violent crime data across the nation, specifically designed to prevent future serial offenders from exploiting the jurisdictional gaps that had allowed Bundy to operate unimpeded for years. Furthermore, the successful use of his uniquely flawed dentition in the Levy trial accelerated the acceptance and reliance on forensic techniques like bite mark analysis in U.S. courts. Theodore Robert Bundy remains the chilling definition of the predator who looks like anyone else, proving that sometimes the monster is the charming student, the helpful neighbor, the man you might let into your life. If Bundy's story proves anything, it is that sometimes the darkest truths are whispered in the quietest, most unsuspecting places. We continue to shine a light into that darkness. Like this video if you were shocked by the sheer audacity of his escapes. Subscribe to The Dark Silent for more deep dives into the criminal mind, and let us know in the comments, what flaw in the justice system do you think he exploited?